and welcome to Higher Hertz. I'm Justin Leopard, your online cello teacher, here today with another lesson for our beginners. And today I want to talk about how you're going to find your cello, how to find a good cello to play on at all, to learn generally what you do when you progress through cellos, and how to find a good cello when you're looking for one that actually fits you. Because one of the nice things about cellos is that they're all different. And even if you buy the same cello model from the same maker and brand, it'll probably sound different. This is actually also true of handmade guitars. There's just little differences in the making process can go a long way. So what that means is that as you start to learn, as you start to discover what you are already inclined to as a cellist, you can actually find a cello that matches it for the same price point as other cellos that might not work as well. So that's the exciting part. Now, of course, probably the main question on your mind is, how do I get a decent starter cello on a budget? And I think a lot of people come into it hoping that they can spend a couple $100 on, like a beater cello or beginner cello. The way that there are these very, very beginner guitars that do fine for, learning the original sort of notes and stuff. And the realistic answer with cello is that there's so many complexities that go into it. I mean, the bridge alone costs more than a couple $100 to have made well. And the bridge is a very important component. I mean, if the strings are at like the wrong height or the wrong height for the cello, or, it's not taking into account the effects of leather on the bridge, just, it's a craft. So, you need all the information. And that's why when you get a cello for just a couple $100, I mean, a set of pegs costs a couple $100. Do you see what I'm saying? A case typically costs hundreds, if not more, dollars. So if you're getting all of that for like $200 or $300, just think about the costs that are getting cut along the way. Now, costs being cut might sound good with you. You want that. But I'm here to tell you, in the long run, I don't think that there's a way to spend less than $1,000 on a cello, because even if you buy the cheaper cello, and you say like, no, I'm just going to commit to this cello and we'll get a new bridge if we need, we'll get new strings if we need. I reckon that the stuff you're going to have to do, not even that long into playing the cello, to make it playable for you is going to cost you possibly more, unless you find like a really friendly luthier who's down to really just help you, and it's okay. Now, some of the things you want to look for when you get a cello are that, it's not like a plywood cello, that it has some sort of real varnish on it. Probably one of the most critical aspects of buying a cello is buying one that's already set up properly. So some of those things I was mentioning before, like what the strings are and the bridge, and making sure that, the bridge is set up properly with the sound post for optimal sound. A lot of that stuff can save you a lot of headaches. So you want to either buy a cello that's sort of guaranteed by the company. Eastman is a good company. Or you want to get a cello through a luthier who's going to, have prepared all of the instruments in their shop. Or you want to rent through a program that allows you to, take the cello into a reputable luthier to make sure that it's set up properly in case something happens in the mail. So basically, the best way to buy a beginner cello is to find one of these, either start with rental and find one of the rental companies that we'll list below that can rent nationally to you, or to find a cello that is like through a catalog or through some sort of known model, and then ideally it comes through a luthier who's going to guarantee the setup and that sort of thing for you. That's going to save you the biggest headache, is doing one of those two options, because you're going to be getting the help that you need, making sure that the cello is going properly. So once again, in the description, I'm going to list some of the specifics that you can go to. But I thought in today's lesson, what would be fun is, instead of just talking about it, that I would go to a luthier shop, one of my favorite luthiers from my area in Southern California, in Santa Barbara, and we're just going to play through some cellos with her, talk about these things. You can hear from the perspective of an instrument master, from the other perspective, the making and taking care of the instrument side of things, some of these things to corroborate how to get the best cello, how to get the most bang for your buck, and some of the more finessey things of finding the right cello for you. As we go inside, what you'll hear as I'm trying the different cellos is that they can have actually a pretty big different sound, and sometimes the price isn't even that different in ones that just have very different sounds. So it's not always better or worse, but you'll get to hear just the open strings a few different cellos, kind of give you the idea that if you were to go into a shop, and maybe you're a little worried still with COVID, but pretty soon you should be able to go back into a shop again comfortably if you're not now. And it's just as easy as asking and explaining your situation and trying out the cello and just seeing what you think. You know, if you truly have absolutely no idea, this is why I say renting is great to start with, because you're going to get a cello that's probably worth more than you could afford. And then from that basis, you know, you're not locked into it. You can figure out what you like as a cello player. You know, whether you want higher action or lower action, whether you like a richer tone or whatever. You know, then when you're looking for your real cello, you have a lot more of a basis for it. I think I've been talking too long. Let's go to the shop. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Dustin.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right, so we're going to talk about some cellos today, how to buy a cello.
That'd be awesome. So much fun.
Let's sit down and just talk about some things first. All right, Linda, thanks so much for meeting with me and helping us just go over some different cellos and talk about some different things. Before we jumped in, I just wanted to ask you, like, what is the process of looking for a cello? Like, what do you look for when you look for a cello? And especially for beginners, but also for people who just want to upgrade, how do you decide?
Well, picking a cello is really, really personal for everybody. You never want to pick a cello out for somebody else. You're looking for a voice that's going to be your voice, and all cellos are so different that, of course, getting your hands on them and playing them. I think for anybody, for me to help them, I try to bring them two cellos at a time, and just ask them to play each one and decide which one they like better. And you know, you can be a rank beginner and just bow open strings, and you could probably right off the get-go tell, oh, I like the feel or the sound of this one better than that one. And that's all it takes for a beginner to go, this one feels better to me. And it could be the shape, the size, or even just the sound and how it feels under the bow. So that works for everybody.
Cool. I've always told people, like, cello is a very unstable instrument. It's got these strings that are kind of difficult to control, and just a lot of precision that goes into making an instrument. So I've always felt like it's really hard to find a cello for under $1,000 that's going to even end up ultimately being under that, because there's going to be things that aren't even just subtle things that like fall apart or need like repair. Is this something you'd agree with in your professional assessment?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, it's all about the setup. And as soon as you've taken a cello, even if it's a really inexpensive cello, and fixed all the things it needs fixing so that it's even playable, it will be over $1,000. And so you want to start out with something that has good bones. And to me, that means you want solid carved top, solid carved back and ribs. You want inlaid purfling. You want ebony fittings. And that's just the start, you know. Then you have to have the right cut bridge. You have to have the fingerboard shaped properly so it's playable. The nut, which is the thing the strings go over at the top at the peg box, has to be the right height. And a lot of times you'll find these really inexpensive cellos look like a cello, but the nut is really high and the fingerboard's warped the wrong way and the bridge is too low or too high, or the tuners don't work because they're made in a place where they're not too good at doing fine tuners. And you know, there's so many things, little things that, and then the strings, if the strings aren't good, the strings are everything. I mean, you can spend a lot.
Those can be like $200.
Well, you can pay more for strings than some people pay for the whole cello, you know. And so to really get it, you know, for me, I try not to set anybody up with a cello that I wouldn't myself like to play.
And this also all just goes to show, like, if you're finding a cello for $300 or even $600, especially if it's coming like with a bow and with a case, like it's like when you stay in a $40 motel, they're only spending like $5 to, you know, change the sheets and everything. You get a cello that cheap, and all of those things that on their own could have been the price of the cello are somehow all bundled.
I can't even buy the wood for that cheap.
Yeah.
That's why it blows my mind that you can get something, a cello-shaped object, basically.
So hands down, the best way to get a cello is from a luthier, from an actual dealer.
String person, ideally, even more so than a music shop. A music shop may have somebody in the shop that just deals with their strings, and that might be okay. But in general, you'll want to go to a luthier, somebody who that's what their specialty is to just work on string instruments. You know, you want to minimally get something you know is set up well for playing, and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. I mean, if you buy an Eastman 100, that's solid carved, it's ebony, they're gonna have a pretty good setup, it's gonna be already dialed in, they have a really good warranty, so you can at least be assured that, you know, it's probably gonna hold up to almost anything, and they're backing it up with a good warranty. So that's important. Or the shop could have their own warranty as well, and give you good customer service if you do have problems, because like you said, they're wood and they're a natural material, and things can happen, and you know, there's unpredictable stuff, and they are like almost living, breathing things, and they react to weather and humidity and all these things that can cause problems. So
if you're on a budget, or if it's just COVID and it's hard to get to a shop, or you're rural, what are the best ways to go about it in terms of maybe rental programs, national rental programs, or just some of the best places to reach out to buy your cello?
Oh, well, you know, there's a lot of good shops out there that provide rentals. I don't particularly rent all over nationwide, but there's some other companies that do, and they do a good job. And renting is a really good way to go. If you really limit it on your budget, it's a good way to get an instrument that's probably better than what you can afford to buy. And a lot of these different string shops offer a trade-in credit. You know, we do, most of them do, give you a trade-in credit for trading your rental in and maybe buying something later down the line. Even. Now, of course, you know, the higher you go, the more there's natural dynamics that happen, so that when you go into a higher pitched sound, it's going to be brighter, maybe a little louder. I think for me, I try to find one for beginners with a nice sounding A string, because they're going to spend a lot of time playing on the D and the A, and you don't want an A that's real strident, whereas a better player might be able to manage a really direct focused A. A beginner may just kind of get frustrated with that.
And I think this one does have that a little bit, like the C and the D, a little warmer, and then the G and the A
a little bit brighter, and that's pretty common, because there's a lot of things acoustically that happen with a cello that are kind of hard to go into, but because of the location of the wolf notes and the fact that the A tends to be, you know, it's just like the E on the violin, it just tends to be more bright in general. But the G, you know, is going to be close to the F or F sharp wolf.
So it is helpful as you're trying different cellos to have the same sort of things that you play each time. So the only thing we played on the first cello was the open strings, but we'll keep doing that on this cello as well and see what we notice. Already so much more balanced and present.
Yes, it has a little more color, a little more warmth, and definitely more balance. You notice it doesn't have a wolf suppressor on there. So it's under 45. So it's still kind of in the same ballpark as the last one we did.
But maybe also a good comparison, because it's
but it's a good one to contrast with, because this one's warmer, a little more tame. This one's a little bit more direct and focused, a little bit more like if you're going to be a soloist or you're doing some, you know, recitals and that sort of thing. This one would be a little higher performing, I think, for that.
Let's see what it sounds like. It's a lot easier to control going into the notes. than the other one, and it's even a little brighter perhaps, but they're also kind of similar levels of how much different color, how much different types of sounds they can
It
get.
has plenty of color to play with. It just is a bit more projection and a little more focus. Yeah.
Finally, let's just compare this against my cello and see whether I'll be upgrading to these. So this is my cello. It's by an Italian maker, Marco Maria Gastaldo, and I purchased it towards the end of my undergraduate music degree program, and it's just been a great cello for me. It can do anything that I kind of want musically from it, and yeah, let's see. So this one is, very balanced, very warm, and just sounds a little bit more like a cello instead of having sounds that you're still having to kind of wrangle in to be what you think of a cello when you think of it.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's got some years on it. When was that made?
It's actually more of a modern instrument.
But it was made like in 2006. So, I mean, it's got some years on it.
Right.
And that's another thing that's really difficult. When you buy a brand new cello with brand new strings and everything's brand new, the cello doesn't really even know it's a cello yet. You have to realize, it's hard to have a crystal ball to know how it's going to develop. But this kind of gives you an idea that for me, a new cello is like the sound waves are square and they have these sharp corners on them. And then as you play it in time, 2 months is real noticeable, 1 year is really noticeable. Those corners start smoothing out, and then I think of the waves, the sound waves getting more curvy and more blended and more mature, and it gets more interesting and more open. So that's something that is hard to predict. But if you like the general character of the cello's voice, you just can imagine that it just is only going to get better as you play it.
That's awesome. Obviously, there's just so much finesse that goes into making a cello that buying a cello can be a really daunting task. But just to summarize, because we also talked about trying different cellos at higher price points and at later points, but to summarize, what do you do when you get a cello, and what's the easiest way to do it in terms of where you actually rent or buy a cello? What do you look for, and how do you actually do it in summary?
What do you look for? To rent a cello? Or to buy a cello?
Right. What do you look for in a cello you're getting?
Well, you want, obviously you want the right size.
Not the right size.
If you're a little kid, you're going to need a different size. There's so many different sizes. Or if you're a small adult, we have 7/8 sizes, for instance. So first you want to go, what size do I need? And then you want to find the appropriate cello level for your playing. And if you're a beginner, you shouldn't be looking at really advanced cellos, and because they're just going to be harder to play.
But finding one that you can rent, or one that's around $1,000, but actually set up, getting one that's set up properly with good strings and a bridge.
Yeah,
it's going to go further than.
Yeah, the basic things you're going to look for, whether you're buying it or renting it. I stay away from laminated cellos or plywood cellos, or things that say ebonite, which means painted other kind of wood. The pegs won't hold, the fingerboard's going to warp. You can't really fix the fingerboard because your person who's going to fix it for you is going to have to grind through this paint. So yeah, you want the bones to be good. You want solid carved spruce and solid carved maple back. You can get away with some of these beginning instruments that have laminated ribs. That's okay. As long as the top and the back are solid carved, if the fingerboard's ebony, the pegs are ebony, and then you have good strings on it. If you buy a cello that doesn't have really good strings on it, no matter how good the instrument is, it's going to sound really bad. So, and you can do a lot for a bad instrument by spending some money on strings. Yeah. So yeah, you just really have to look for the bones to be good, and know that if you at least get that, the money that you put into to make it better won't be wasted. You'll have return on it. Whereas if you get just a laminated cello, it's just going to not have the resonance and the clarity and that wonderful thing that attracts you to cello. No matter what you do, I mean, it can sound a little better with strings and things like that, but you're just pouring money into something that's just not going to be worth more than a few $100 no matter what you do.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. Your expertise is well welcome, and I hope everybody's gotten to appreciate that. Linda, thanks so much for having us over.
Well, thanks for coming over and checking out my shop.
lindawest.com. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. It was an absolute blast being able to go into a shop, share that experience with you guys. Linda's awesome. If you're in that area, definitely contact her, visit her website to look at the cellos she has. She actually records all the cellos in her stock, which is not something usually done by online sellers. Like I was saying, every individual cello is different, so you can actually hear when you're looking at her website, which is pretty cool, lindawestcellos.com. We are very excited to be able to bring you the best lessons that we can about cello at higher hertz. Learning cello can be a really daunting task, and at the end of the day, it's definitely best if you can work with other people. However, a lot of the times, not only does it help to be able to try something on your own first, but it helps to just know what the information is, even if you do develop a good relationship with a luthier and regularly go, and even just knowing the basics about how it's set up and everything is going to help you on your journey of being a cellist. So really hope you enjoyed the experience today. Really hope you stay subscribed below for more lesson videos. Once again, I'm Justin Leopard. You can find me at the Vagabond Cellist. This has been a production with Higher Hertz. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time.